My husband threw me out in the rain with nothing. 3 minutes later a black SUV pulled up. Rain hit my face so hard it felt like needles. I stood barefoot on the porch clutching a trash bag full of clothes while my husband slammed the front door behind me with enough force to shake the windows. For a few seconds, I just stared. Stared at the house I helped pay for. The flower pots I planted every spring. The curtains I picked out during happier years. Inside that house was 10 years of my life. And suddenly, none of it belonged to me anymore. Derek, I screamed over the storm, pounding on the door. Please open the door. The porch light snapped off. My chest tightened. Not anger at first. Shock. Pure shock. An hour earlier, I had still been making spaghetti in that kitchen. Now I was standing in freezing rain at midnight with nowhere to go. My phone was dead, my purse still inside, and the man I loved had locked me out like I was garbage. Lightning flashed across the street, illuminating my reflection in the wet window beside the porch. Mascara streaked down my cheeks. Hair soaked. 38 years old, homeless. I sank onto the top step trying to breathe through the panic rising in my chest. How did it get here? 2 years earlier, Derek had lost his job at a marketing firm in Chicago after company layoffs. At first, I supported him completely. You'll find something better, I told him every night. And honestly, I believed it. Back then Derek was charming, funny, ambitious. The kind of man who danced with me in the kitchen while old music played from our tiny speaker. But losing that job changed him. Slowly. Then all at once, the interviews stopped. The drinking increased. His temper sharpened. Every conversation turned into an argument. If I asked about bills, he accused me of nagging. If I suggested therapy, he called me judgmental. So I worked more hours at the hospital. Double shifts sometimes. I told myself marriages go through hard seasons. I told myself love meant staying. But little by little, I disappeared inside that marriage. The final fight started over something stupid. It's strange how life-changing moments usually do. I came home exhausted from a 12-hour nursing shift and found Derek sitting in the dark drinking whiskey while unopened bills covered the coffee table. The electricity company called again, I said gently. He didn't answer. Derek, I said I'll handle it. When? His eyes lifted slowly, and immediately I knew this conversation would explode. Why do you always talk to me like I'm some loser? I don't. You think because you work and I don't right now, you're better than me. I dropped my keys onto the counter harder than intended. I never said that, but we are 3 months behind on bills. Then maybe work another shift, he snapped. That sentence hit me like a slap. I stared at him, because something inside me finally broke. You know what hurts the most? I whispered. I don't even recognize you anymore. He stood suddenly, knocking over the whiskey glass. Then leave. I'm trying to save our life. No, he shouted, voice echoing through the house. You just love acting superior. I have carried this family for 2 years. And I'm tired of hearing about it. The silence afterward felt dangerous. Heavy. Then he pointed toward the door. Get out. I laughed once in disbelief. You're joking. Get out. I'd never seen his face look like that before. Red. Furious. Broken. I grabbed my coat carefully, thinking he would calm down. Thinking this would pass. But when I reached for my purse, he snatched it first and tossed it onto the couch. You can come back tomorrow for your stuff. Derek, stop. Then, he opened the front door and threw my clothes into a trash bag. Like I was nothing. Like 10 years meant nothing. And now here I was, sitting in the rain outside the home I once called mine. Thunder rolled overhead. I buried my face in my shaking hands and cried harder than I had cried in years. Not because of the house. Not even because of Derek. But because deep down, I knew this wasn't just one bad night. This was the end. Then headlights appeared through the rain. A long black SUV slowly pulled up beside the curb. At first I ignored it. Probably someone lost. But then the driver's side door opened. A tall older man stepped out holding an umbrella. Claire. I froze. Nobody had called me Claire in months except coworkers. The man walked closer, peering through the storm. And suddenly I recognized him. Mr. Bennett. Arthur Bennett smiled softly despite the rain. I almost couldn't believe it. Arthur Bennett had been one of my patients at the hospital nearly 8 months earlier. 72 years old, recovering from heart surgery, widower, difficult with everyone except me. Most nurses avoided him because he was demanding and grumpy. But something about him reminded me of my father. Lonely men often hide pain behind anger. So I treated him kindly. I brought him extra blankets when he complained about the cold. Sat with him after my shift ended because he hated sleeping alone after surgery. Listened to stories about his late wife Margaret. One night I even stayed nearly an hour late because he had a panic attack after waking from a nightmare. You remind me of my daughter, he told me once quietly. I remembered smiling sadly. I hope that's a compliment. It is. Now he stood in front of me in the pouring rain looking horrified. My God, he said. What happened? Humiliation burned through me instantly. I wiped my face quickly. It's nothing. Just marriage problems. Arthur looked toward the house. Then at the trash bag beside me. That man threw you out. I couldn't answer. Because suddenly if I spoke, I would completely fall apart. Arthur removed his expensive wool coat and wrapped it around my shoulders despite the rain. You're freezing. I'm okay. No, he said firmly. You're not. Something about hearing genuine concern after months of emotional emptiness nearly destroyed me. The SUV passenger door opened and a younger woman stepped out. Probably mid-30s. Elegant dark coat. Kind eyes. Dad, she called. Arthur nodded toward me gently. This is Claire, the nurse I told you about. Recognition crossed her face immediately. Oh, she hurried over without hesitation. I'm Emily, she said softly. Please get inside the car. Oh no, I couldn't. You absolutely could. I looked back at the dark house one last time. No porch light, no Derek, nothing. So I climbed into the SUV trembling from cold and shock. The warmth inside nearly made me cry again. Emily handed me tissues while Arthur sat beside me. For several minutes nobody pushed me to explain anything. That kindness alone felt unbearable. Finally Arthur spoke quietly. We were coming back from dinner downtown. I recognized you immediately. I nodded weakly. I'm sorry you had to see this. Claire, he said gently, there's nothing shameful about being hurt. Those words cracked something open inside me. I turned toward the window quickly because tears started falling again. The driver took us to a beautiful high-rise apartment building overlooking downtown Chicago. I hesitated stepping inside. Everything looked expensive. Polished marble floors, warm lighting, fresh flowers in the lobby. I can't stay here, I whispered. Nonsense, Arthur replied. You're staying. Tonight. Emily smiled kindly. We have 3 guest rooms nobody uses. 3 guest rooms. I almost laughed at how different this world felt from mine. Upstairs, Emily gave me dry clothes and tea while Arthur disappeared briefly. When he returned, he handed me a phone charger. You said your phone died. That tiny detail nearly broke me completely. Because Derek used to remember small things like that once. Long ago. After showering, I sat curled on the edge of the guest bed staring into my tea while rain tapped softly against massive windows. Emily knocked lightly before entering. You okay? Such a simple question. Yet nobody had asked me that sincerely in years. I think so. She sat beside me carefully. My father talks about you often. I blinked in surprise. He does. You sat with him after Mom died. Most people just rushed through his room. I looked down quietly. He was lonely. Emily's eyes softened. So are you. That hit too close to home. We talked for almost 2 hours. About marriage, life, exhaustion. She admitted she'd gone through a brutal divorce herself 5 years earlier. I thought staying made me strong, she said quietly. Sometimes leaving takes more courage. At some point during the conversation, I realized something painful. I felt safer with these near strangers than I had felt with my husband in months. The next morning I woke to sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows. For a few peaceful seconds, I forgot everything. Then reality crashed back. Derek. The fight. The rain. The humiliation. My phone buzzed repeatedly once it charged. 23 missed calls. 14 texts. Most started angry. Where are you? Don't ignore me. You embarrassed me last night. Then gradually the tone changed. Claire, please come home. I'm sorry. Please answer. I stared at the screen numbly. Not because I missed him. But because I suddenly realized how normal this chaos had become. Arthur invited me to breakfast downstairs. I almost refused out of embarrassment, but hunger won. The dining room overlooked the city skyline. Fresh coffee filled the air. For the first time in months, I ate without anxiety tightening my stomach. Arthur watched me carefully over his newspaper. You spent years taking care of other people, didn't you? I smiled faintly. I'm a nurse. That's the job. No, he said gently. I think it's who you are. Something about older people seeing straight through you can feel terrifying. Or comforting. Sometimes both. Later that afternoon, I returned home with Emily to collect my belongings. I was terrified, not of Derek hitting me. He never had. But emotional cruelty leaves bruises too. When we pulled into the driveway, Derek burst through the front door immediately. His face looked awful, red eyes, unshaven, panicked. Claire. I stepped out slowly. Emily remained near the car quietly watching. Derek looked between us in confusion. Who's that? A friend. He nodded rapidly. Baby, listen, I was drunk. I didn't mean it. I crossed my arms tightly because seeing him again hurt more than expected. You threw me out in a storm. I know. I messed up. You locked the door. His face crumpled slightly. I got angry. I stared at him for a long moment. Then I noticed something strange. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of his moods anymore. Distance changes perspective. The house behind him suddenly looked smaller. Darker. Sad. I came for my things, I said quietly. Derek's eyes widened. You're seriously leaving? I didn't answer immediately. Because part of me mourned the life we almost had. The children we planned. The vacations we never took. The version of him I kept, hoping would return. But another part of me remembered standing barefoot in the rain holding a trash bag. And that part had finally awakened. I think I already left a long time ago, I whispered. He started crying then. Real crying. Not manipulative. Not angry. Just broken. I need you. That sentence nearly shattered my resolve. Because once upon a time, hearing those words would have made me stay forever. But now I understood something heartbreaking. Love cannot survive where respect disappears. I needed you too, I whispered back. The silence afterward felt enormous. Derek covered his face with both hands. I'm sorry. And strangely, I believed he meant it. But some apologies arrive after too much damage. I packed quietly while Derek sat at the kitchen table staring downward. Every room carried ghosts. Birthday dinners. Movie nights. Christmas mornings. Ordinary moments now soaked in grief. As I carried my final box outside, Derek suddenly spoke again. Who are those people? I looked toward the SUV where Arthur waited patiently. Someone I was kind to once. Derek frowned slightly. What? I swallowed hard. Turns out kindness comes back when you need it most. He looked like he wanted to say something else. But he didn't, and maybe that was for the best. Over the next several weeks, Arthur and Emily helped me more than I thought possible. Not with money, with dignity. Arthur connected me with a small furnished apartment owned by a friend. Emily helped me replace basic necessities. But more importantly, they listened. No judgment, no pity, just compassion. One evening Arthur invited me to dinner again. Halfway through dessert, he became unusually quiet. Then he slid an envelope across the table. What's this? Open it. Inside was paperwork. I blinked in confusion. What am I looking at? Arthur smiled softly. A scholarship fund. For who? For nurses returning to school. I stared at him speechless. You mentioned once you gave up your master's degree because life got complicated. Emotion rushed into my throat instantly. That was years ago, and I can't accept this. Yes, Arthur said firmly. You can. Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. Nobody's ever done something like this for me. Arthur leaned back quietly. After Margaret died, I stopped believing people were good. Then a tired nurse sat beside an angry old man night after night expecting nothing in return. I looked down quickly as tears spilled over. You gave me my humanity back, Claire. That moment changed something deep inside me. Because for years, I thought my kindness was invisible. Worthless even. Just exhaustion. Just sacrifice. But somehow, without realizing it, small acts of compassion had traveled further than I knew. Months passed. Then almost a year. I returned to school part-time while continuing hospital shifts. Life wasn't magically perfect. Some nights I still cried unexpectedly. Some mornings loneliness hit hard. But slowly, I began recognizing myself again. The real me, not just someone surviving another person's storms. One snowy December evening, I finished a late hospital shift and walked outside to find a familiar black SUV waiting near the curb. Arthur rolled down the window smiling. "You look exhausted." I laughed softly. "Story of my life." Dinner. I climbed into the warm car smiling for what felt like the first genuine time in years. As city lights reflected across the snowy streets, I looked out the window quietly. A year ago, I thought my life ended the night my husband threw me out in the rain. But sometimes losing the life you planned is the first step toward finding the one you were meant to live.